Low pressure, don't need on 4, clear 5. Clear. Turning 5. Roger.
Give me takeoff power. Jets, 100%.
The writing was on the wall. It was very obvious that the B-52 was coming in, that the B-36 was holding the space for the 52, and it held it very well. I cannot, and that's not taking credit away from any other aircraft. I love the Boeing company. I love the B-17, the B-29, and the B-52. But the B-36 has a little special place in history, and that's why I'm so glad to talk about it. It was an airplane that had, quite frankly, lots of problems. It had lots of engine problems. And I joke and I say, the main thing was to get off. And to get off with 10 engines. And that was a lot of power. We're talking about propellers that are 19 feet across. And we're talking about 4 jets, 2 on each wing. So that aircraft slammed you right up against that bulkhead. But then once you got up, then it was always, I joked, to people, and I'd say, it's almost SOP that you would come back with at least 1, 2, maybe 3 engines out. And that really was, other than the non-com back there, who manned the only armament we had, which was the 20 millimeters and the tail. I mean, they were observing to check on any kind of oil leaks or any kind of smoke. And I can remember, we always had engines closed down. But I always felt secure with that airplane. First of all, I had a great respect for the pilots. I had the greatest respect for them. And I saw them land in conditions that no way other pilots would. You talk about the young hot rod pilots. Well, that's fine. But these guys were good. And they always got us back home. And we never, we had engine problems. But, we were determined. I can remember very clearly at the end of one of our missions, we had to, this is one of the squares I was talking about, we had to squeeze off our tail guns, cannons, once a quarter. And we had to do that at 50,000 feet. And we had to do that out at for us, at the Boeing range, which was off the Columbia River. I can remember coming down to Columbia River. I think we had at least 2 engines out. They were fighting with another one. They weren't real sure about getting up to 50,000. And I remember the AC coming on. That is the Major Waller saying, guys, we are going to fill this square. Now you put your Mae West on and you put your parachutes on, but we are going to do this. And we did. And we got back home. So it was, and I have the greatest respect for the mechanics and the specialty guys. And it seemed like it was the engines always. It seemed like, and Len Carmel was very, very sharp on the equipment, the bombing equipment. But I don't ever remember having an in-ear, during a mission problem with our bombing equipment. It was always the engines. And I remember, waiting, 6 hours sometimes, longer. We could wait 8 hours. I remember we were going out one time on a bomber stream, 21 aircraft. And we came in early. We were supposed to have an 8 o'clock takeoff. We had very bad weather. We waited and we waited. And we finally got, because there was going to be a break, we all got lined up. And just a few minutes before 4 o'clock, which was our deadline, we all saw the first plane going down the runway. But anyway, we were on this one mission, super secret mission. And in this case, they did bring in a specialized navigator. And this fellow, I mean, he walked to a different drummer because his eyebrows came, like, they grew out here about 3 inches, and he curled them like this. I guess so you'd never forget him. But anyway, he was going to be our lead navigator. And he was, because he was from the Caribbean, he was an expert in Loran navigation. So off we go, and we go up, right up the border of the Soviet Union. And maybe I told you the story. And we have scoops on our plane. And the Soviet Union had just dropped a weapon. And so we're picking up all the materials. So we're flying, whatever, 27 hours or something up there. And those experiences make me feel good, that I was a part of that era. And that we can say that, we flew out of Fairchild. We had the capability of flying up to Fairbanks, picking up a weapon, and flying to Siberia and dropping an atomic weapon, a nuclear weapon. And we could do that. And we would do that. And we just knew as much as we lived that we would do that. And we didn't, it was just, it's kind of a trite saying, but, and you hear it today, and I guess you've heard it from, service people throughout time. It was our job. And we did our job. And we practiced our job.
Yeah. How often did you carry weapons?
We didn't carry weapons.
You didn't?
No.
Okay. Do you have ballast or something to simulate the weight difference?
We did one time. We carried a dummy weapon, and we dropped it in Southern California.
Oh, you actually released it?
Yeah. And that was quite an experience. The airplane really jumped. Yeah, and it was heavy. The airplane really labored to get off. I mean, it was a huge weapon. What is it, 28 feet long? And and we didn't mess with anything else. I mean, that was our only goal, and I'm sure that the Soviet Union knew that. I mean, they knew that from Fairchild Air Force Base there would be a flight coming with various targets, and they would drop them. And we had no qualms about that. There was no debate. Well, there simply wasn't. I mean, you didn't debate that. I remember one time, I mean, all guys in the military can tell stories, but I remember one time when a memo came out that the next day was a holiday. Everybody knew it was a holiday. And for our crew, they had us for some kind of duty. And we all said, this is nonsense. It's obviously an error. Some guy, some airman first made an error typing. Let's not go. No, you will be there. So we were there. And so what did they say? Oh, you know what? It was an error. Go back home. But I mean, that's what it was.
Obviously, during the Korean War, the big concern was the MiG-15, and then later the MiG-17. What were you told about the Soviets' ability to intercept the bombers and engage with their fighters?
Once again, I was a low man on the totem pole as far as the commission. I didn't hear a thing, to be honest with you. Now, I must say, we had a 25-mile corridor. And I must say, there were a couple of times when we did have, friends up on our wing, and then they would write you up. I remember that coming down from Alaska one time. And the Canadian Air Force, or military, came up to see what was going on. But, it was a time that you responded to that. I mean, and you know, it was good that they did that, because who knows what. But most of the time, I didn't hear anything about fighters. We just, you know, we had those twin cannons in the back, and we had some ECM equipment, and we just did our missions.
It wasn't your problem.
No, and you know, the person that probably had the greatest problem were the engineers, because those engines really, you know, consumed a lot of fuel. I can remember, this sounds really kind of unbelievable in a way, but we were coming back cross country and coming across Boise, Idaho, at about, I don't know, 40,000 feet. And for some reason, we got right in the middle of the jet stream.
I was just going to ask you about that. At that altitude, you had to deal with the jet stream from time to time, obviously.
And that
must have given you fits of it.
And our engineer went crazy. Yeah. He said, "You got to get us out of here, or we're going to be walking home if we can." Yeah. And we did. No, that was a major problem.
Because you just didn't have the power to overcome it.
No. And you know, they would use their jets sometimes for climbing, you know, and sometimes if they need to equal something. But the jets were used mainly for takeoffs and in climbing. Yeah. And they provided a lot of power.
Yeah. But fuel consumption, of course, they burn the fuel.
Yeah. The other thing that they talk about the airplane is kind of a novel thing is, did you ever go down the trolley cart, or did you ever go down through the tunnel? And do you know that I was, well, other than the radio guy, the first radio guy, he was a master sergeant, I was the tallest on the crew. I spent most of my missions, other than standing, because there was and we had no bunk. If you wanted to take a nap, and the naps were short and far between, we just curled up on our equipment bags. And you know, well, I won't mention this, but you know, it's just, you know, human psychology and human training is so interesting. But you know, we had a pitot tube in front there. And of course we used that, but we never used any of the other facilities, and we could be up for 24 hours. And our human system was so adapted to that. I mean, that's kind of it's not a very nice topic, but it just shows you what the human body can do. I was the only one that went on the cart. And I thought it was kind of fun. You know, when we were a lightweight crew, so things were, but there were some bunks back there. And you know, I think that's where we did the, I think we warmed some of our dinners on some of the equipment up front. And then the guys, you know, they had some type of cooker back there. But no one else, and the guys in the back never came forward. But yeah, it was, you know, we were, like I say, it was such an interesting time, because when we were flying, we were a very close-knit group. I'll tell you another example of the pressure. You know, I told my little story about Diane being born and not getting off the crew. Our first navigator had a cyst on his tailbone, and it was horribly sore, terribly. And he thought that going to the doctors, you know, he would get some relief and maybe an excuse to be off the crew for a while. No way. You know what the prescription was? They gave him a donut to sit on, and that's what he sat on for 24 hours when we were up front. Yeah, and I had a feeling, and once again, it's just one guy talking. I had a feeling that the wing commanders and the squadron commanders were running the medics. and you know, you flew, and you filled those squares, and you demonstrated to the Soviet Union that you had the capability, and it was a very serious time.
Did you always fly the same airplane, or do you rotate?
We rotated, yeah. I never recognized that we flew. They were all kind of standard, and maybe the guys upstairs would have some kind of recognition of that, and maybe the engineers did. But for us, and like I say, it seemed like the navigational equipment and the bombing equipment and the radar navigational equipment was always solid. And I'm sure it went through routine maintenance, but it was primarily, in my way of thinking, were the 4360 engines.
When you were flying, would you say you more frequently flew single ship missions, or were they with other aircraft? No,
mostly single ship. Yeah, we would do bomber streams sometimes, and we would have like a large group briefing, and then we would have a large group debriefing. And they always had, and I guess this is an old, you know, maybe you've heard this from some of the World War II guys. They always had a really great table of the finest scotch that you could drink, and you could take a shot or two if you wanted to, and many times we did.
Did the engine situation ever improve, or was it a headache the whole time?
From my perspective, it never improved. It was always there was always a call from the back that there was smoke or that there was a fire, and you know, you can look at books and you can see that the guys in the back, you know, they had about 11 different patterns that they could describe of smoke, of something beyond smoke, you know, light smoke, dark smoke, you know. And to me, my job was to help that radar bombardier, and that's what I did, and I was proud of it.
Did you have any opportunity at all to do any navigation yourself?
On one check ride, I did. Yeah, going into St. Louis, I did, and that was a good test for me, because that was on an evaluation trip or flight out of Carswell, and we were, you know, I was going merrily along, and suddenly, you know, the inspector observer or chief observer said, "Ridley, you're now navigating. Take us into the target." And you know, we got there. I'm sure, you know, between you and me and the fence post, as my dad used to say, I'm sure I got some help from upstairs, but meeting the pilots. But yeah, that was the only time. My main job was to help that radar man. You know, those experiences make me feel good that I was a part of that era, and that we can say that you know, we flew out of Fairchild. We had the capability of flying up to Fairbanks, picking up a weapon, and flying to Siberia and dropping an atomic weapon, a nuclear weapon. And we could do that, and we would do that. And we just knew as much as we lived that we would do that. And we didn't, you know, it was just, you know, it's kind of a trite saying, but, and you hear it today, and I guess you've heard it from, you know, service people throughout time. It was our job, and we did our job, and we practiced our job.